Daniel walked quickly through the shining halls of the orbital trade station. His boots clicked on the polished floor, and he tried to look calm, though his mind raced with nervous thoughts. Today was his first assignment as a guide for an alien delegation. He had studied the Duran language for weeks, repeating words and phrases until they became a song in his head, but now, as the moment came closer, he worried he would forget everything. The Duran Alliance was not just another visiting group. They were powerful and proud, known across the stars for their discipline and their careful traditions. Every human officer on the station had been warned to show nothing but respect. A single mistake could harm years of diplomacy. Daniel was not an officer, only an engineer who knew enough of their language to help. Yet somehow, he had been chosen as a guide. When he reached the docking bay, the large doors opened with a slow hiss, and the Duran delegation entered. They walked in formation, tall and graceful, their armor-like clothing shining with strange patterns. Their faces were smooth and pale, their eyes glowing faintly like polished stone. They carried themselves with calm power, as if every step was part of a ritual. Daniel's heart pounded as he looked at them, but then his eyes stopped on one figure. She was different from the others, though she wore the same clothing. Her movements were sharper, her gaze focused, yet there was something softer about her expression. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, he forgot where he was. The leader of the delegation introduced the group in their language. Daniel waited until it was his turn. He stepped forward, bowed slightly the way he had practiced, and tried to speak the words of welcome. His tongue stumbled on the formal title, and instead of saying "respected envoy," the sound came out wrong. What he said was closer to "lovely." The room grew still. The other Duran tilted their heads, a faint sound like whispers passing between them. Daniel felt his chest tighten. Had he just insulted their envoy in front of everyone? He swallowed hard, trying to think of a way to fix it. But then he noticed her face. The envoy, the one who had caught his attention earlier, was staring at him. Her pale cheeks glowed with sudden color, a soft shimmer that spread across her skin. Her lips parted slightly, and for the first time, her calm mask broke. She looked almost startled. Daniel's training told him to apologize immediately, to bow again and correct the word, but before he could speak, the envoy stepped closer. Her voice was calm, but there was something beneath it, like a hidden flame. "Say it again, human." The words echoed in his ears. Daniel blinked, unsure if he had understood correctly. He had expected anger, not a request. The other Duran stood silent, watching closely. I meant to say respected envoy," Daniel said quickly, his voice shaking. "I must have made a mistake." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but not in anger. The faint glow on her face deepened, and she repeated herself, slower this time. "Say it again." Daniel felt trapped. Every instinct told him to avoid further mistakes, yet something about her tone pulled at him. She was not mocking him. She was testing him. With a nervous breath, he whispered, "Lovely." The glow on her skin spread again, brighter than before, and for the first time since entering the room, the envoy smiled. It was small, controlled, but it was a smile all the same. The other Duran exchanged more whispers, and the leader cleared his throat, signaling for the group to continue. Daniel, still unsure of what he had just done, stepped back and tried to focus on his role. He guided them through the station, pointing out the paths and facilities, but his mind stayed locked on that single moment. Why had she reacted that way? Why did the words seem to carry so much weight for her people? He had only meant it as a polite mistake, yet it seemed like something more. The envoy, however, stayed close to him as they walked. She did not speak much, but when she did, her eyes lingered on him longer than necessary. Daniel felt his pulse rise every time. He did not know her name yet, but he knew this was the beginning of something unexpected. By the end of the day, when the delegation was shown to their quarters, Daniel bowed once more. The envoy stopped before entering, looked directly at him, and spoke softly in human language, though with a strong accent. Lovely. The single word, spoken back to him, sent a shiver down his spine. Then she turned and walked inside, leaving Daniel standing in the hall, more confused than ever, but strangely hopeful. Daniel barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard her voice again. The way she had said that single word in human tongue, slow and careful, had stayed with him. Lovely. It echoed in his head like a song that would not fade. The next morning, as he sat in the mess hall drinking lukewarm coffee, another human officer approached him. It was Mark, one of the station's translators. Mark leaned on the table, his expression half amused and half serious. "You caused a storm yesterday," Mark said. Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" Mark sat down across from him. Word spread fast. "The Duran envoy you guided? She's been asking questions about you. About humans. About why we use certain words the way we do. The rest of her delegation is confused, maybe even worried. You must have said something unusual." Daniel rubbed his forehead. He remembered the whispers, the glow of her skin, her sudden change in expression. "I think I said the wrong word. I was trying to greet her formally, but I think I called her, lovely." Mark stared at him for a long moment, then let out a low whistle. "That explains it. Daniel, do you know what that means to them?" Daniel shook his head slowly. "I thought it was just a mistake." Mark leaned closer. "In their culture, words of beauty or affection are not casual. They are almost sacred. When a Duran calls someone beautiful or lovely, it's more than just a compliment. It's like saying your spirit recognizes theirs. It's not said in public unless it has deep meaning." The weight of Mark's words pressed on Daniel's chest. He had meant no harm, but suddenly he understood why the envoy had reacted that way. What he had said was not small. To her people, it could be a vow. "I didn't know," Daniel whispered. "Well, she did," Mark replied. "And the fact she asked you to repeat it? That's rare. You may have started something you can't step away from." Daniel finished his coffee in silence. His stomach twisted, half with fear and half with something else he did not want to name yet. Later that day, he was called to guide the delegation again. The hall outside their quarters felt tense, the air heavy with the quiet stares of the Duran guards. When the envoy stepped out, she looked calmer than yesterday, but her eyes went straight to him. "Guide," she said, her voice even. "Walk with us." Daniel nodded quickly. He led them through the station's trade sector, pointing out the markets, the meeting halls, the gardens where plants from dozens of worlds grew side by side. The other delegates listened with polite distance, but the envoy stayed closer to him, walking almost at his side. At one point, while the others stopped to study a wall of holographic art, she turned to him. "You spoke a word," she said softly, so only he could hear. "Do you know what it means for my kind?" Daniel hesitated. He remembered Mark's warning, but he chose honesty. "I know now. At the time, I didn't. It was a mistake." But I did not mean to insult you. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but in curiosity. You humans use words so freely. You do not fear their weight. Why? Daniel thought for a moment. Because sometimes words help us connect. Even if they are small or imperfect, they open a door. Without them, we might never understand each other at all. She studied him for a long time, her glowing eyes reflecting the light of the station ceiling. Then, to his surprise, her cheeks flushed again, that same shimmering color as before. She turned away quickly before the others noticed. When the tour ended, Daniel prepared to leave, but the envoy stopped him. "Walk with me longer," she said. He followed her to the station's central garden, where tall glass windows revealed the stars beyond. They walked between the plants in silence until finally she spoke again. "In my culture, we do not share such words unless we are bound to them. Yet when you spoke, it felt different. I do not know why." Daniel swallowed. "Maybe because I didn't follow your rules. Humans don't wait for the perfect moment. Sometimes we just say what we feel, even by accident." She looked at him, her glowing skin softening again. "And do you feel it? Or was it only a mistake?" Daniel's heart pounded. He did not know how to answer. Part of him wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all, but another part wanted to tell her the truth. He barely knew her, yet he could not forget her presence. Before he could speak, one of the other Jiren called out for her. She straightened, her calm mask returning. She gave Daniel one last glance, then walked away with her people. Daniel stood in the garden long after she had gone. He knew something had changed. His single mistake had not only created a misunderstanding. It had opened a door he was not sure he could close again. Daniel's days on the station usually passed in the same rhythm, fixing power lines, checking life support panels, and eating quick meals before going back to work. But ever since the Jiren delegation had arrived, that rhythm was broken. He found himself waiting each morning to see if he would be called to guide them again. And more often than not, he was. The strange part was that the request always came from the same envoy. Her name, he learned from one of the officials, was Arya. The name suited her, simple yet carrying a quiet grace. Whenever the delegation needed to tour the station, she would ask for Daniel by name. The other humans began to notice, whispering about it in the mess hall, but Daniel tried to ignore them. He told himself it was only because he had studied their language, but deep down, he wondered if there was more. One afternoon, he guided them through the station's inner garden. The tall glass walls showed the stars outside, while small fountains flowed between green plants. It was one of Daniel's favorite places, and he was glad to share it. The other Jiren studied the plants with interest, but Arya stayed beside him. "You said humans use words without fear," she said in her careful voice. "But you also make places like this. You value peace as much as freedom." Daniel smiled faintly. "Yes. This garden is here to remind us we're not just workers or soldiers. We need beauty too. We need a place to breathe." She walked slowly beside him, her glowing eyes studying the leaves. "On my world, gardens belong only to the leaders. Ordinary people are not allowed inside." Daniel blinked in surprise. "Then you must be seeing something rare right now." Arya paused, then looked at him with a soft expression. "Yes. Rare." They stopped at a fountain where water poured gently into a clear pool. Daniel sat on the edge, and to his surprise, Arya joined him. Her people stood at a distance, perhaps giving her space, perhaps confused by her choice. Daniel picked up a small stone from the path and tossed it into the pool, watching the ripples spread. "This is something children do," he said. "We make ripples and watch how far they go. It feels simple, but it's peaceful." Arya leaned forward and touched the water with her finger. The surface rippled again, catching the light. For a moment, the sight seemed to soften her disciplined features. "You show me many things humans do," she said. "But you do not answer my question from before." Daniel turned his head toward her. "Which question?" She met his gaze directly. "When you called me that word. Did you mean it?" His throat went dry. He had been waiting for her to bring it up again, but now that she had, he struggled to find words. "At first, it was a mistake," he admitted. "I didn't plan it. But now, yes, I do mean it. You're strong, and calm, and different from anyone I've met. To me, you are, lovely." Her skin glowed again, brighter this time, a shimmer like the light of a new dawn. For a moment, her composure broke, and Daniel saw something vulnerable in her. She quickly looked away, as if trying to hide it, but the glow remained. "You speak so easily," she whispered. "Do humans not fear binding themselves with words they cannot take back?" Daniel shook his head. "We do fear it sometimes. But we still say it. Because if we wait too long, the chance might be gone forever." She studied him in silence. Then, to his shock, she repeated softly, "Lovely." Her voice carried the human word with a slight accent, but it was clear enough. Daniel's chest tightened. She had given the word back to him, and he knew it meant something powerful in her culture. The moment ended when one of the Duran leaders called her name sharply. Arya straightened, her mask of discipline returning. She rose from the fountain and walked back to her group, but before leaving, she gave Daniel one more glance. It was not cold or distant. It was a promise of something growing between them. Later that evening, Daniel sat in his quarters, unable to focus on anything else. He replayed the moment again and again, the glow of her skin, the way she had spoken his word back to him. It was more than just curiosity now. A bond was forming, fragile yet undeniable. He did not know what it meant for the future. He did not know what her people would think if they discovered she had returned his word. But one thing was certain. From that moment on, the distance between human and Duran felt smaller. And for the first time, Daniel allowed himself to hope. The days that followed felt heavier on the station. What had started as polite trade talks between humans and Duran slowly began to shift into arguments. Reports spread through the halls that the Duran leaders were dissatisfied with human methods, calling them careless and impatient. On the human side, officers whispered that the Duran were too proud, too rigid, and unwilling to trust. Daniel heard these things as he worked, but he felt them more clearly when he guided the delegation again. The air around the meetings was tense, and the voices in the council chambers grew louder. Arya, who had once seemed curious and calm, now carried herself with a sharper edge. Still, whenever her eyes found Daniel's, the mask of steel cracked for a brief second, and he saw the same warmth hidden inside her. One evening, after another long day of tours and negotiations, Arya asked Daniel to meet her in the observation dome. It was late, and the dome was nearly empty, the stars shining through the glass in endless patterns. Daniel stepped inside and found her standing near the railing, her hands resting lightly against the metal, her glowing eyes fixed on the vast black sky. "You came," she said without turning. "I did," Daniel replied softly. "You asked me to." She looked at him then, her skin catching the faint light. Your people and mine are close to breaking this agreement. They fight with words now, but soon they may fight with more. I am caught between them. Daniel walked closer but kept a respectful distance. Because of me. Because of us, she corrected. Her voice was steady, but her hands gripped the railing tighter. The others see the way I speak with you. They wonder if my judgment has been changed. They do not trust easily. To them, a single word like the one you gave me is no small thing. They believe it ties me to you. Daniel felt the weight of her words. And does it? Arya turned fully toward him now, her eyes glowing brighter. I do not know. But I feel different when I stand near you. I hear your words and see your ways, and they are not the same as mine. At first, I thought it was weakness. Now I wonder if it is strength. Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to reach out, but he kept his hands still. We don't always plan our words, he said. Sometimes we speak because it's the only way to show what's inside. Maybe that looks reckless to your people. But to us, it's honest. She studied him in silence. The stars reflected in her eyes, and the faint glow on her skin deepened. Honest, she repeated slowly, as if tasting the word. To my people, restraint is honor. To yours, openness is strength. How can two such ways live side by side? Daniel gave a small smile. By learning from each other. By seeing both as valuable. You bring balance. We bring courage. Together, maybe we find something better. Arya's expression softened for a moment, but then the sound of approaching footsteps broke the quiet. Another Duran officer entered the dome, giving Daniel a sharp look before speaking in their own language. Arya's shoulders stiffened. She gave Daniel one last glance before following the officer out. Daniel stood alone beneath the stars, wondering if he had said too much. The next day, the situation grew worse. In the council chamber, voices rose as both sides argued about trade routes and patrol rights. Daniel, stationed outside as an aide, could hear the tension building. When the doors opened, the Duran delegation left with cold faces, while the human officers muttered angrily among themselves. Later, Arya found Daniel again in the garden. Her tone was quieter this time, almost weary. They say humans cannot be trusted, she told him. That your kind promises easily but breaks those promises just as fast. They ask me to choose their side without question. But when I think of your words, I cannot. Daniel looked at her, feeling the pressure of her conflict. Arya, you don't have to choose sides. You can choose truth. If you see honesty in us, speak it. If not, then follow your people. But don't let fear make the choice for you. Her eyes softened, though her face still showed struggle. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, Daniel said. But sometimes the hardest choice is the one that feels true, even if it risks everything. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Arya turned toward the stars visible through the garden glass. Perhaps that is what I must do. Risk everything. She walked away then, her step slow but steady, leaving Daniel with a sense that something was about to change. That night, Daniel could not sleep. He thought of her words, her conflict, and the glow of her skin when she had spoken with him. Whatever happened next, he knew the bond between them was no longer just a small accident. It was becoming something larger, something that could shape the fate of both their peoples. The station was quieter at night. Most of the crew returned to their quarters, and only a few guards and late workers moved through the long silver halls. Daniel often liked this time. It gave him space to think, to look out the wide windows at the endless stars. That evening, he received a message through his COMM. It was short and simple: meet me in the observation dome. The sender was Arya. Daniel felt his chest tighten. He knew what it meant when she asked for him alone. He walked quickly through the quiet halls, his footsteps echoing softly, until he reached the dome. Arya was already there. She stood near the glass, her tall figure outlined against the field of stars. The faint glow of her skin was brighter than the soft lights above, and her eyes reflected the constellations outside. "You came," she said, her voice calm but softer than usual. Daniel nodded. "I would always come if you ask." For a moment, silence stretched between them. The hum of the station filled the space, and the stars seemed to watch like quiet witnesses. Then Arya turned to him fully. "When you called me that word," she began, her voice lower now, "I told myself it was only an error of language. But since that day, you have repeated it. And each time, it feels different. I must know. Did you mean it? Or do you say it without thought?" Daniel felt his heartbeat quicken. He had known this question would come. He looked into her glowing eyes, searching for the right words. "At first," he admitted, "it was an accident. I was nervous, and I said the wrong thing. But now it's not a mistake. I mean it. You are strong, Arya. You are wise. And to me, you are lovely." Her cheeks glowed brighter, a soft shimmer spreading across her face. She looked down for a moment, her composure breaking, then raised her eyes again. "You speak with such ease, Daniel. To my people, such words carry weight. They are like vows. To speak them without fear is unusual." Daniel stepped a little closer, though careful not to invade her space. "Maybe that's what makes us human. We don't wait until everything is perfect. We speak when we feel it, even if it's risky. Because if we stay silent, the chance might be lost forever." Arya studied him for a long time. Then she whispered, almost as if testing the sound, "Lovely." Hearing her say it again, in his own language, struck Daniel harder than he expected. The word, spoken by her, felt heavier, more real. He knew she would not say it unless she meant it. Their eyes locked. For a moment, the walls of culture and duty seemed to fade. There was only Daniel and Arya, standing under the stars, bound by a word that meant more than either of them had planned. "I do not understand all your ways," Arya said quietly. "But when I speak this word, I feel something I cannot deny. Perhaps your kind is reckless. Or perhaps, you are brave." Daniel smiled faintly. "Maybe both." Arya's lips curved into the smallest smile he had ever seen from her. It was brief, but it was real. Before either of them could say more, the station lights dimmed for the night cycle. The dome grew darker, the stars shining even brighter outside. Daniel felt the weight of the moment pressing down. "Arya," he said carefully, "whatever happens between our people, I want you to know this. I meant what I said. And I will not take it back." She lowered her gaze, her glowing cheeks still warm. "Then I will not take back what I have said either." They stood in silence again, but it was no longer heavy. It was full, alive, as if the stars themselves carried their unspoken bond. Finally, Arya turned away, her composure slowly returning. "We must return. Tomorrow, there will be more arguments, more talks. But tonight, I will remember this. Daniel nodded, his chest still tight with emotion. So will I. As she walked toward the door, she paused once, glancing back at him. Her eyes softened, and her voice was gentle. Lovely. Then she left, her steps quiet, leaving Daniel standing in the dome with the stars still watching. He knew then that this was no longer a misunderstanding. It was real. And it was only the beginning. The next day began with unrest. The corridors of the station carried sharp whispers from both sides. Human officers muttered that the Jurin were impossible to please, while Jurin delegates claimed humans had no discipline. Every passing hour made the air heavier, as if the walls themselves held their anger. Daniel sensed it even before the council doors opened. He stood outside as usual, waiting in case the delegation needed guidance. Through the walls he heard voices rise, sharp and firm. Then the doors slid open, and the two sides stepped out, their faces grim. One of the human commanders passed Daniel with a frown. "They'll walk away if this keeps up," he said under his breath. "We may lose this treaty." Arya followed with the rest of her people. Her steps were steady, but her glowing eyes flickered with unease. When she passed Daniel, her gaze lingered for a heartbeat before she looked ahead again. He knew she was holding something back. That evening, another meeting was called, this one larger, with more witnesses from both sides. It was meant to be the final push to settle the trade agreement, but instead it turned into another storm. Humans argued that open routes were needed for fair trade. Jurin leaders refused, demanding strict control. Arya sat among her people, her expression calm but tense. Daniel watched from the side of the chamber, unsure if he should even be there. The voices grew louder, words sharper, until finally one of the Jurin leaders spoke with open disdain. "Humans speak of promises," the leader said, his voice cold. "But their words are careless. They speak without thought, and they break trust as easily as they give it. How can we tie our future to a race that values words so little?" The chamber fell quiet. The accusation was heavy, and the human commanders shifted uncomfortably. Daniel felt his stomach twist, knowing that this was not just an argument, it was the edge of failure. Then, to his surprise, Arya rose from her seat. Her glowing skin caught every eye as she stepped forward. She spoke in her own language first, her voice steady and strong. The other Jurin turned toward her, startled. Daniel could not understand all the words, but Mark, the translator beside him, whispered quickly, "She's defending us. She says humans do not speak carelessly, they speak honestly. That their words are not weak but brave." The chamber buzzed with whispers. Some Jurin looked shocked, others disapproving. But Arya did not falter. She continued, her voice ringing with conviction. Finally, she turned her eyes toward Daniel and spoke in human tongue so all could hear. "This man," she said clearly, "gave me a word. A word he did not plan, but a word he did not take back. To you, it may seem careless. To me, it showed truth. He risked insult, he risked shame, but he spoke from his heart. That is not weakness. That is strength." Daniel froze, every eye in the chamber suddenly on him. His face burned, but he could not look away from her. One of the Jurin leaders rose, his voice sharp. "You risk your honor speaking so. Do you bind yourself to this human's reckless ways?" Arya met the leader's gaze without fear. "I bind myself to truth. If humans are reckless, then perhaps we need some of that courage. If they are open, then perhaps we should learn from it. I will not stand silent while their honesty is called weakness." The room fell into silence. Even the human officers seemed stunned. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the lead human commander stepped forward. If an envoy of the Duran can see value in us, perhaps there is hope after all. We are not perfect, but neither are you. Let us find balance together. The words slowly began to shift the tone in the room. The arguments softened, turning to cautious discussion. The storm had not ended, but the path toward peace reopened, and it was Arya who had forced it back into view. When the meeting ended, Daniel found her outside the chamber. She stood tall, though her expression showed the weight of what she had done. "You risked everything in there," Daniel said quietly. Arya turned to him, her cheeks faintly glowing. "Yes. My people will question me. Some may never forgive me. But I could not stay silent. Not after what I have learned." Daniel's voice was low, but firm. "Thank you. For believing in us. For believing in me." Her eyes softened, and for a moment she allowed herself a small smile. "Lovely," she whispered again, almost too softly to hear. Daniel felt his chest tighten. That word, spoken here, after everything she had risked, carried more weight than ever before. He realized then that this was no longer just about trade, or even about trust between species. It was about them, two people from different worlds, daring to bridge the space between with honesty and courage. And though the future was still uncertain, Daniel knew the choice Arya had made tonight would change everything. The last meeting of the treaty took place 2 days later. The long chamber was filled with leaders from both sides, their faces serious but calmer than before. The tension that once hung heavy was now replaced with careful hope. Everyone knew the decision made today would shape the future of both races. Daniel stood at his usual place near the side wall. His hands were clasped behind his back, but his thoughts were restless. He looked across the chamber and found Arya among her people. She stood tall, her glowing skin steady and bright, showing no sign of fear. When her eyes briefly met his, he felt strength rush through him. The human commander opened the session. "We have argued. We have doubted. But today, we must decide. Will humans and Duran walk apart, or will we walk forward together?" The Duran leader who had opposed the treaty spoke first. His voice was cool but less sharp than before. "I still do not trust easily. But Arya has reminded us that truth is not weakness. If humans can keep their word, then perhaps trust can grow." Another Duran leader added, "If this treaty is broken, the fault will be heavy. But if it is kept, both sides will rise stronger." At last, the oldest Duran stood. His deep voice echoed in the chamber. "Let us take this step. We will sign." The human side nodded. Relief spread across the room. The treaty was read aloud once more, its terms clear and balanced. Then, one by one, leaders stepped forward to press their seals on the agreement. Humans used ink and paper, while Duran pressed glowing crystal stamps that burned symbols into the page. When the last seal shone, the chamber filled with quiet applause. The treaty was done. Daniel felt a wave of relief, but his heart was pulled toward Arya. She had been the spark that saved this fragile bond. Without her, everything might have fallen apart. When the chamber emptied, Daniel found her standing near the large window that looked out into the stars. The light of distant suns reflected on her silver hair and glowing skin. She looked like she belonged to the stars themselves. "It is finished," Daniel said softly as he walked up beside her. "Yes," she replied, her voice calm but thoughtful. "Our worlds are tied now. It will not be easy, but it has begun." He looked at her, knowing the question that weighed on him. And you? What will happen to you now? Arya lowered her gaze for a moment. I must return with my people. I spoke against them in public. Some will forgive me. Some will not. My place among them will never be the same. Daniel's chest tightened. He had known this answer would come, yet hearing it felt heavy. You risked everything for us. For me. Her glowing eyes lifted to meet his. I did what I believed was right. But, her voice softened. There is something I want to say before I go. He waited, his heart pounding. She stepped closer, her glow faint but steady. When you called me lovely, I felt something I did not understand. Now I know. It was not just a careless word. It was a truth. A truth that belongs to both of us. Daniel swallowed hard. Then let me say it again. You are lovely, Arya. And I mean it with all I am. For the first time, she let herself smile fully. It was soft, almost shy, but filled with warmth. I will remember that, she whispered. Silence stretched between them, but it was not empty. It was full of unspoken promises. Finally, Daniel found his voice. Will I see you again? Arya looked out at the stars, then back at him. The treaty will bring more meetings, more journeys between our worlds. I cannot promise when, but yes. We will meet again. He nodded slowly. It was not the answer he wanted, but it was enough. A promise of tomorrow, even if far away. She reached out, placing her hand lightly on his arm. Until then, Daniel. Keep your word. Keep your courage. That is what makes you human. That is what makes you strong. He placed his hand over hers. And you keep your light. It guides more than you know. For a long moment, they stood like that, two figures from different worlds bound not by treaty alone, but by something deeper: trust, respect, and a bond that neither distance nor duty could break. At last, her people called for her. She stepped back, her glow brighter now, as if giving him one final gift. Farewell, lovely, she said softly, and turned toward the waiting ship. Daniel watched as she walked away, her silver hair shining under the station lights. The doors closed behind her, and he stood alone by the window, staring into the endless stars. But he was not empty. He carried her words, her courage, and the unspoken promise between them. The treaty had joined two worlds, but it had also created something else, something even greater. Hope. And Daniel knew, deep in his heart, that this was only the beginning.